In this lesson, we'll read Cost of Living by Robert Sheckley, and you can find this reading with the questions in the video description, linked for a Google Chrome document. And here we have Robert Sheckley, a quick biography of him. He was born in 1928 and he died in 2005. He was a famous American science fiction writer with a sharp satirical wit, earned him comparison to masters of irony such as Kurt Vonnegut and Evelyn Waugh. Born in New York City and raised in New Jersey, he began his publishing short fiction in the early 1950s. Now, something about his writing this would have been post-World War II era. So it was the height of post-war American consumer culture when GI Bill mortgages, television advertising, and the rise of credit financing were transforming domestic life. So the GI Bill would have been an opportunity that veterans had when they came home. They would have got a mortgage for a lower rate. And a mortgage is just a special kind of loan that you get from the bank that's only for a home. So if you hear someone say they have a mortgage, it would be for their house. I guess you could have a boat mortgage. I don't really know what they would call that one, but mortgages are associated with homes. And before I read, he would want to know, what does the term cost of living even mean? That just refers to how much your basic everyday living expenses month to month are. So I just put in my own city, comparing it to San Diego. So Buffalo is pretty cold in New York State. Now, if I lived in New York City, my cost of living would be a lot higher than living in Buffalo, because some locations, the cost of living is higher because your cost of living would include your rent. So rental prices in Buffalo can go from around $1,000 a month, whereas San Diego is saying $3,000. And the average listing cost of the home, which that would be your mortgage payment monthly, is a little over $1 million. So in Buffalo, that would be much different. So the cost of living is just your groceries, your car insurance, your rent or mortgage, your phone bill, anything you need, your groceries, things that you're buying each month to survive, basically. And another key term here would be financing something. So let's say you financed a car. You bought a $5,000 car and now you have a 3-year lease or a 3-year term to pay it. Your car that costs $5,000 is actually going to cost more money because they're adding interest payments to your cost. Because since you can't pay it on right away, payment plans is something that adds interest. So you have to pay to borrow the money. So this makes a lot of sense as we get into our story. All right, we have Carrin decided that he could trace his present mood to Miller's suicide last week. But the knowledge didn't help him get rid of the vague, formless fear in the back of his mind. It was foolish. Miller's suicide didn't concern him. But why had that fat, jovial man killed himself? Miller had everything to live for. Wife, kids, good job, and all the marvelous luxuries of the age. Why had he done it? So now we meet our protagonist, a man named Carrin, and we learn that his conflict, we could say a character versus self-conflict, because he is confused, and he does say Miller's suicide didn't concern him, but the fact that he's thinking about it, and this is a neighbor of his who killed himself, you could say that he probably is concerned by it. So that would be our conflict right at the start. Good morning, dear, Carrin's wife said, as he sat down at the breakfast table. Morning, honey. Morning, Billy. His son grunted something. You just couldn't tell about people, Carrin decided, and dialed his breakfast. The meal was gracefully prepared and served by the new Avignon electric auto cook. His mood persisted annoyingly enough even since Carrin wanted to be in top form this morning. It was his day off, and the Avignon electric finance man was coming. This was an important day. Okay, now, this story was written in the 1950s, but obviously they didn't have robot chefs in the 1950s because we don't even have robot chefs now yet. They're probably coming. But this tells us the setting, that even though the story was published in 1950, our author Sheckley is setting this story in a distant future because that would be what the technology shows. His mood persisted. Annoyingly enough, since Carrin wanted to be in top form this morning, it was his day off and the Avignon electric finance man was coming. This was an important day. He walked to the door with his son. Have a good day, Billy. His son nodded, shifted his books, and started to school without answering. Carrin wondered if something was bothering him, too. He hoped not. One worrier in the family was plenty. See you later, honey. He kissed his wife as she left to go shopping. At any rate, he thought, watching her go down the walk, at least she's happy. He wondered how much she'd spend at the A&E store. Checking his watch, he found that he had half an hour before the A&E finance man was due. The best way to get rid of a bad mood was to drown it, he told himself, and he headed for the shower. The shower room was glittering plastic wonder, and the sheer luxury of it eased Carrin's mind. He threw his clothes into the A&E automatic clean presser and adjusted the shower spray to notch above brisk. The 5 degrees above skin temperature water beat against his thin white body. Delightful! And then a relaxing dry rub in the A&E auto towel. Wonderful, he thought, as the towel stretched and kneaded his stringy muscles. It should be wonderful, he reminded himself. The A&E auto towel with shaving attachments had cost $313 plus tax. But worth every penny of it, he decided, as the A&E shaver came out of the corner and whisked off his rudimentary stubble. After all, what good was life if you couldn't enjoy the luxuries? His skin tingled when he switched off the auto towel. He should have been feeling wonderful, but he wasn't. Miller's suicide kept nagging at him, destroying the peace of mind on his day off. Was there anything else bothering him? Certainly there was nothing wrong with the house. His papers were in order for the finance man. Have I forgotten something? He asked out loud. The Avignon Electric finance man will be here in 15 minutes, his A&E bathroom wall reminder whispered. I know that. Is there anything else? The wall reminded reeled of its memorized data, a vast amount of minuet about watering the lawn, having the jet lash check, buying lamb chops for Monday, and the like. Things he still hadn't found time for. All right, that's enough. He allowed the A&E auto dresser to dress him, skillfully draping a new selection of fabrics over his bony frame. A whiff of fashionable masculine perfume finished him off, and he went into the living room, threading his way between appliances that lined the walls. Now, you could say that Robert Sheckley predicted like Alexas and Siris and smart houses, where literally the wall is telling him what to remind him, an A&E bathroom wall reminder. So I think it's interesting when science fiction writers in the 1950s and 60s, 70s were able to make these predictions of the technology we see today. A quick inspection of the dials on the wall assured him that the house was in order. The breakfast dishes had been sanitized and stacked, the house had been cleaned, dusted, polished, his wife's garments had been hung up, his son's model rocket ships had been put back in the closet. Stop worrying, you hypochondriac, he told himself angrily. The door announced Mr. Pathis from Avignon Finance is here. Carrin started to tell the door to open when he noticed the automatic bartender. Good God, why haven't I thought of it? The automatic bartender was manufactured by Castle Motors. He had bought it in a weak moment. A&E wouldn't think very highly of that, since they sold their own brand. He wheeled the bartender into the kitchen and told the door to open. A very good day to you, sir, Mr. Pathis said. Now, this is showing that these corporations wield a lot of power. Because normally if you bought something from Target, you wouldn't be nervous that Walmart would know you bought something from them. So this kind of shows this power dynamic between the customers and these companies, that it seems like the customers are a bit scared of their companies. Pathis was a tall, imposing man dressed in a conservative tweed drape. His eyes had crinkled corners of a man who laughs frequently. He beamed broadly and shook Carrin's hand, looking around the crowded living room. A beautiful place you have here, sir. Beautiful. As a matter of fact, I don't think I'll be overstepping the company's code to inform you that yours is the nicest interior in this section. Carrin felt a sudden glow of pride of that, thinking of the rows of identical houses on his block and the next, and the one after that. This would be a sales tactic, because if every house looks the same and then you have the salesman coming in and saying his house is the most beautiful, we could assume that's some manipulation. Now then, is everything functioning properly? Mr. Pathis asked, setting his briefcase on a chair. Everything in order? Oh yes, Carrin said enthusiastically. Avignon Electric never goes out of whack. The phone all right? Changes, records for the full 17 hours? It certainly does, Carrin said. He hadn't had a chance to try out the phone, but it was a beautiful piece of furniture. The Solido projector all right? Enjoying the programs? This would be like a TV. Absolutely perfect reception. He had watched a program just last month, and it had been startlingly lifelike. How about the kitchen? Auto cook in order? Recipe master still knocking him out? Marvelous stuff. Simply marvelous. Mr. Pathis went on to inquire about his refrigerator, his vacuum cleaner, his car, his helicopter, his subterranean swimming pool, and the hundreds of other items Carrin had bought from Avignon Electric. Everything is swell, Carrin said, a trifle untruthfully, since he hadn't unpacked every item yet. Just wonderful. I'm so glad, Mr. Pathis said, leaning back with a sigh of relief. You have no idea how hard we try to satisfy our customers. If a product isn't right, back it comes, no questions asked. We believe in pleasing our customers. I certainly appreciate it, Mr. Pathis. Carrin hoped the A&E man wouldn't ask to see the kitchen. He visualized the Castle Motors bartender in there like a porcupine in a dog show. I'm proud to say that most people in this neighborhood buy from us, Mr. Pathis was saying. We're a solid firm. What was Mr. Miller a customer of yours? Carrin asked. That fellow who killed himself? Pathis frowned briefly. He was, as a matter of fact. That amazed me, sir. Absolutely amazed me. Why, just last month the fellow brought a brand new jet lash for me, capable of doing 350 an hour on a straightaway. He was as happy as a kid over it. And then to go and do a thing like that? Of course the jet lash brought up his debt a little. Of course. But what did that matter? He had every luxury in the world, and then he went and hung himself. Hung himself? Yes, Pathis said, the frown coming back. Every modern convenience in his house, and he hung himself with a piece of rope, probably unbalanced for a long time. The frown slid off his face, and the customer's smile replaced it. But enough of that. Let's talk about you. Now, this would be a very disturbing conversation, because basically, he's saying that this Mr. Miller had bought a jet, which I don't know why a regular person kind of needs a jet, especially considering how much these people seem to be working. They're working every day, so where are they flying the jet to? But anyways, and we also learned he hasn't even looked at any of his goods. So, well, he's looked at them, but he doesn't use them. So we have Carrin here with a bunch of unopened items, quite costly, and then we have Mr. Miller committing suicide after buying a quite costly item. And then we have Mr. Pathis. This is a very, you could say, offensive thing to say. Basically here he's insinuating that he had all these fancy pieces of technology that he could have found a more technologically advanced way to take his life. So it is clear that Mr. Pathis does not have much sympathy whatsoever for Mr. Miller. The smile widened as Pathis opened his briefcase. Now then, your account. You owe us $203,000.29, Mr. Carrin, as of your last purchase, right? Right, Carrin said, remembering the amount of his own papers. Here's my installment. He handed Pathis an envelope, which the man checked and put in his pocket. Fine, now you know, Mr. Carrin, that you won't live long enough to pay us the full $200,000, don't you? No, I don't suppose I will, Carrin said soberly. He was only 39 with a full 100 years of life before him, thanks to the marvels of medical science, but a salary of $3,000 a year. He still couldn't pay it all off and have enough to support his family on at the same time. Okay, so $200,000 back in the 1950s would have been a lot more money, like possibly $1 million. And even if if he was making $3,000 a year and he was $200,000 in debt, that is quite the difference. You wouldn't even be able to pay off your debt in a year, or like you need quite a lot of years here to pay this off. Hundreds. So in this case, we have to see how this works, because normally banks are not allowed to loan. Well, there's rules where you can only take out loans in the amount that the banks believe you can pay back. So when you go to get a mortgage, if you had a $500,000 mortgage, the banks want to know that you're making enough money. So this type of situation, we wouldn't exactly see in our present time, but there are types of lending. You would call this predatory lending, where they lend you a lot of money with a high interest, knowing that you're really not going to be able to pay it back. And then they just take money from you for life, basically. Of course, we would not want to deprive you of your necessities, which in any case is fully protected by the laws we help formulate and pass. To say nothing of the terrific items that are coming out next year, things you wouldn't want to miss, sir. See, this shows here that things were changed, that allowed these companies to allow people, their customers, to have a lot more debt. Mr. Carrin nodded. Certainly, he wanted new items. Well, suppose we make the customary arrangement. If you will just sign over your son's earnings for the first 30 years of his adult life, We can easily arrange credit for you. This here, people, is not something that's allowed to happen in our present day. Mr. Pathis whipped the papers out of his briefcase and spread them in front of Carrin. If you'll just sign here, sir. Well, Carrin said, I'm not sure. I'd like to give the boy a start in life, not saddle him with... But my dear sir, Pathis interposed, this is for your son as well. He lives here, doesn't he? He has every right to enjoy the luxuries, the marvels of science. Sure, Carrin said, only... Why, sir, today the average man is living like a king. 100 years ago, the richest man in the world couldn't buy what any ordinary citizen possesses at present. You mustn't look at it as upon a debt. It's an investment. That's true, Carrin said dubiously. He thought about his son and his rocket ship models, his star charts, his maps. Would it be right, he asked himself. What's wrong, Pathis asked cheerfully. Well, I was wondering, Carrin, signing over my son's earnings, you don't think I'm getting in a little too deep, do you? Too deep, my dears, Pathis exploded into laughter. Do you know Mellon down the block? Well, I don't say I said it, but he's already mortgaged his grandchildren's salaries for their full life expectancy, and he doesn't have half the goods he's made up in his mind to own. He'll work something out for him. Service to the customer is our job, and we know it well. Carrin wavered visibly. And after you're gone, sir, they'll all belong to your son. That was true, Carrin thought. His son would have all the marvelous things that filled the house, and after all, it was only 30 years out of a life expectancy of 150. He signed with a flourish. Now, this basically means that his son is going to owe all of this money, and his salary is basically going to go to this company for the first 30 years of his life. And it gets worse when we learn that neighbors are sacrificing their grandchildren's salaries. Excellent, Pathis said. And by the way, has your home got an AE master operator? It hadn't. Pathis explained that a master operator was new this year, a stupendous advance in scientific engineering. It was designed to take over all the functions of house cleaning and cooking without its owner having to lift a finger. Instead of running around all day pushing half a dozen different buttons with the master operator, all you have to do is push one. A remarkable achievement. Since it was only $535, Carrin signed for one, having it added to his son's debt. Right's right, he thought, walking Pathis to the door. This house will be Billy's someday. He and his wife's. They certainly will want everything up to date. Just one button, he thought. That would be a time saver. After Pathis left, Carrin sat back in an adjustable chair and turned on the Solido. After twisting the easy dial, he discovered that there was nothing he wanted to see. He tilted back the chair and took a nap. The something on his mind was still bothering him. Hello, darling. He awoke to find his wife at home. She kissed him on the ear. Look! She had bought an AE sexitizer negligee. He was pleasantly surprised that was all she had bought. Usually Leela returned shopping laden down. It's lovely, he said. She bent over for a kiss and giggled, a habit he knew she had picked up from the latest popular Saladish star. He wished she hadn't. Going to dial supper, she said, and went into the kitchen. Carrin smiled, thinking that soon she would be able to dial the meals without moving out of the living room. He settled back in his chair, and his son walked in. How's it going, son? He asked heartily. All right, Billy answered listlessly. What's the matter, son? The boy stared at his feet, not answering. Come on, tell Dad what's the trouble. Billy sat down on his packing case and put his chin in his hands. He looked thoughtfully at his father. Dad, could I be a master repairman if I wanted to be? Mr. Carrin smiled at the question. Billy alternated between wanting to be a master repairman and a rocket pilot. The repairmen were the elite. It was their job to fix the automatic repair machines. The repair machines could fix just about anything, but you couldn't have a machine fix a machine that fixed a machine. That was where the master repairman came in. This is really like our present day when they say that the jobs, well, this is what our tech CEOs say, that the most important jobs will be plumbers and electricians and robotic engineers. And our basic jobs, any jobs that involve driving or mundane tasks, will be replaced by robots. But it was a highly competitive field, and only a very few of the best brains were able to get their degrees. And although the boy was bright, he didn't seem to have an engineering bent. It's possible, son. Anything is possible. But is it possible for me? I don't know, Carrin answered as honestly as he could. Well, I don't want to be a master repairman anyways, the boy said, seeing that the answer was no. I want to be a space pilot. A space pilot, Billy, Leela asked, coming to the room. But there aren't any. Yes, there are, Billy argued. We were told in school that the government is going to send some men to Mars. Now, here's a very hurtful conversation, because we could assume here that the reason Carrin is telling his son he can't be a repairman, master repairman, is because that would take schooling. And at this point, Carrin has literally signed his son's wages over for the first 30 years of his life. So that means that there is really no possible way that Billy can now go to college, because he literally now has to go and get a job as soon as he gets out of high school. And it probably won't be a skilled job, because he won't be able to afford the college because he's already has these loans in his name. They've been saying that for 100 years, Carrin said, and they still haven't gotten around to doing it. They will this time. Why would you want to go to Mars? Leela asked, winking at Carrin. There are no pretty girls on Mars. I'm not interested in girls. I just want to go to Mars. You wouldn't like it, honey, Leela said. It's a nasty old place with no air. It's got some air. I'd like to go there, the boy insisted sullenly. I don't like it here. What's that? Carrin asked, sitting up straight. Is there anything you haven't got? Anything you want? No, sir, I've got everything I want. Whenever his son called him sir, Carrin knew something was wrong. Look, son, when I was your age, I wanted to go to Mars, too. I wanted to do romantic things. I even wanted to be a master repairman. Then why didn't you? Well, I grew up. I realized there were more important things. First, I had to pay off the debt my father had left me. And then I met your mother. So now we know here, people, that this is a learned habit, that it is acceptable in these families to do this to your children. Leela giggled. And I wanted a home of my own. It'll be the same with you. You'll pay off your debt and get married, the same as the rest of us. Billy was silent for a while. Then he brushed his dark hair straight like his father's, back from his forehead, and wet his lips. How come I have debts, sir? Carrin explained carefully about the things a family needed for civilized living and the cost of those items, how they had to be paid, how it was customary for a son to take on a part of his parents' debt when he came of age. Billy's silence annoyed him. It was almost as if the boy were reproaching him after he had slaved for years to give the ungrateful whelp every luxury. Son, he said harshly, have you studied history in school? Good. Then you know how it was in the past. How would you like to get blown up in a war? The boy didn't answer. Or how would you like to break your back for 8 hours a day, doing work a machine should handle, or be hungry all the time, or cold with the rain beating down on you and no place to sleep? You could say here that he's being quite dramatic, because it's one thing to not have anywhere to sleep, but it's another thing to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of stuff you're not even using. So there is definitely a difference. He paused for a response, got none, and went on. You live in the most fortunate age mankind has ever known. You are surrounded by every wonder of art and science, the finest music, the greatest books in art, all at your fingertips. All you have to do is push a button. He shifted to a kindlier tone. Well, what are you thinking? I was just wondering how I could go to Mars, the boy said. With the debt, I mean. I don't suppose I could get away from that. Of course not, unless I stowed away on a rocket. But you wouldn't do that. No, of course not, the boy said, but his tone lacked conviction. You'll stay here and marry a very nice girl, Leela told him. Sure I will, Billy said. Sure. He grinned suddenly. I didn't mean for any of that stuff about going to Mars. I really didn't. I'm glad of that, Leela answered. Just forget I mentioned it, Billy said, smiling stiffly. He stood up and raced upstairs. Probably gone to play with his rockets, Leela said. Such a little devil. The Carrins ate a quiet supper, and then it was time for Mr. Carrin to go to work. He was on a night shift this month. He kissed his wife goodbye, climbed into his jet lash, and roared to the factory. The automatic gates recognized him and opened. He parked and walked in. Automatic lace, automatic presses, everything was automatic. The factory was huge and bright, and the machines hummed softly to themselves, doing their job and doing it well. Carrin walked to the end of the automatic washing machine assembly line to relieve the man there. Everything all right, he asked? Sure, the man said. Hadn't had a bad one all year. These new models have their built-in voices. They don't light up like the old ones. Carrin sat down where the man had sat and waited for the first washing machine to come through. His job was a soul of simplicity. He just sat there and the machines went by him. He pressed a button on them and found out if they were all right. They always were. After passing, the washing machines went to the packing section. The first one slid by on the long slide of rollers. He pressed the starting button on the side. Ready for the wash, the washing machine said. Carrin pressed the release and let it go by. That boy of his, Carrin said. Would he grow up and face his responsibilities? Would he mature and take his place in society? Carrin doubted it. The boy was a born rebel. If anyone got to Mars, it would be his kid. But the thought didn't especially disturb him. Ready for the wash? Another machine went by. Carrin remembered something about Miller. The jovial man had always been talking about the planets, always kidding about going off somewhere and roughing it. He hadn't, though. He'd committed suicide. Ready for the wash? Carrin had 8 more hours in front of him, and he loosened his belt to prepare for it. 8 hours of pushing buttons and listening to a machine announce its readiness. Ready for the wash? He pressed the release. Ready for the wash? Carrin's mind strayed from the job, which didn't need too much attention in any case. He wished he had done what he had longed to do as a youngster. It would have been great to be a rocket pilot, to push a button and go to Mars. This idea of the Mars travel, you could say, because you could say it's symbolism when he says that, and especially now that we know that Miller also joked about going off and roughing it. Now we would kind of, I feel like this, you could interpret this however you want, obviously, but I feel like the idea of going to Mars is kind of similar to our present day. If people say they're going to go and live off the grid, like with solar panels, no cell phones, their own well water, and they're not going to participate in this consumer high technology society. So when he says this, that it wouldn't disturb him if his son did go to Mars, he's kind of showing here that maybe he does know why Miller killed himself. Maybe he's reflecting it. You could say the irony in the story is Carrin never comes to this realization that it seems as though Miller might have killed himself, because we actually don't know we don't know how this system works, but we could maybe assume that the reason that Mr. Miller took his life is that he felt so guilty about putting these burdens on his children. And if the person who signed the original loan dies, I would wonder if maybe that negates the debt for the children. So obviously we can assume that Mr. Miller's suicide was probably brought on by his extreme debt, but it might also play into something that maybe there is a loophole that your children don't have to inherit the debt if you die. But we don't know. I mean, that was what I might be thinking, because we see Carrin feeling very guilty about what he's done to his son. He's struggling with it because he doesn't exactly admit that he feels guilty about it. But the fact that we see his point of view here, saying the stuff like he wouldn't mind if his son went to Mars, it's kind of showing that he wouldn't feel as guilty if maybe his son did escape this system that Carrin has now pushed him into. And in the next video, we will go over our written questions here. And here you can find our vocabulary terms if you want to review those and check the definitions. And you can use it as a little way to test yourself by, you can see if you understand what the word was, if you can define the word on your own through the context, and then go back and check and see if your definition was right. And these will be the discussion and essay questions that we will work on at the bottom here. So we will do that in part 2 of this lesson.